I'm Jessica, 29, and last Saturday night at Harvest and Table in Scottsdale, my own father stood up in front of the entire restaurant and declared that since I don't contribute anything meaningful to this family, I should be the one picking up the check for everyone. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just a customer that night. I was the owner of every single Harvest and Table location across 3 states, and his public humiliation was about to backfire in ways he never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in the sun-baked suburbs of Phoenix, I always felt like the odd one out in the Martinez family. My parents, Linda and Robert, built their lives around traditional expectations and conventional success markers. Dad worked as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company, while Mom taught elementary school for over 20 years before retiring. They raised us in a modest but comfortable home in Ahwatukee, where success was measured by steady paychecks, suburban stability, and most importantly, following the prescribed life path. My older brother Michael embodied everything my parents hoped for in their children. Star athlete in high school, business degree from Arizona State, married his college sweetheart Sarah right after graduation, and immediately started climbing the corporate ladder at a logistics company. By 25, he had 2 beautiful children, Emma and Tyler, a house with a white picket fence in Scottsdale, and what everyone considered the perfect life. He coached Little League on weekends, attended every school function, and posted family photos that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Ashley, my younger sister, followed a remarkably similar trajectory. She married her high school boyfriend David when she was 22, had their daughter Chloe 2 years later, and settled into suburban motherhood with seeming contentment. David manages a local credit union, and Ashley works part-time as a dental hygienist, allowing her to maintain the work-life balance our parents always preached about. Their conversations revolve around school districts, weekend soccer games, and planning family vacations to places like Disneyland and Sedona. Then there was me, the family enigma who somehow veered completely off the expected course. While my siblings played sports and dated in high school, I spent my free time reading business magazines, watching documentaries about successful entrepreneurs, and running small ventures like tutoring and organizing neighborhood garage sales. My bedroom walls weren't covered with boy band posters or sports memorabilia, but with charts tracking my savings account growth, and articles about women who built business empires from nothing. My parents seemed perpetually confused by my interests, often asking when I would outgrow this business phase and focus on more realistic goals like finding a nice young man to settle down with. During family dinners while Michael discussed his latest promotion and Ashley shared updates about Chloe's developmental milestones, my contributions about market trends or investment strategies were met with polite but dismissive nods. The message was clear: my interests weren't as valuable or meaningful as their life choices. After graduating from Arizona State with a business degree and a 3 GPA, I shocked everyone by turning down a stable corporate job offer to start my own consulting firm. While my classmates were celebrating their entry-level positions at established companies, I was working 18-hour days from my tiny studio apartment, building client relationships, and reinvesting every dollar back into the business. My parents worried constantly, frequently asking when I would get a real job with benefits and stability. The early years were brutal. I lived on ramen noodles and instant coffee, drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic, and wore the same 3 business outfits to client meetings. While Michael and Ashley were buying homes and starting families, I was sleeping on a futon and using my kitchen table as an office desk. Family gatherings became exercises in enduring well-meaning but painful questions about when I would settle down and stop chasing unrealistic dreams. But something magical happened in year 3. My consulting firm, Desert Analytics, had built a reputation for helping small businesses optimize their operations and increase profitability. Word spread through Phoenix's tight-knit business community, and suddenly I was consulting for restaurant chains, retail franchises, and tech startups. My client roster grew from local mom-and-pop shops to multi-million-dollar enterprises seeking efficiency improvements and growth strategy. By 26, I had expanded Desert Analytics to include strategic investment services, using the profits from consulting to acquire stakes in promising businesses. My first major acquisition was a struggling restaurant chain called Harvest and Table, which had amazing food and concept but terrible management and financial systems. The previous owners were hemorrhaging money and desperate to sell. I saw the potential immediately. The farm-to-table concept was perfectly positioned for Arizona's health-conscious market. The locations were prime real estate, and the problems were entirely fixable with proper business systems. I structured the purchase through a holding company, maintaining complete anonymity, while implementing the operational changes that transformed Harvest and Table from a failing venture into the most successful casual dining chain in the Southwest. Within 2 years, we expanded from 8 struggling locations to 15 thriving restaurants across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. The secret was treating employees well, sourcing from local farms, and creating an atmosphere where families felt welcomed and valued. The financial transformation exceeded my wildest projections. What started as a consulting business operating from my studio apartment had evolved into a diversified portfolio generating multiple income streams. My annual earnings now comfortably reached into 7 figures, with the majority coming from business acquisitions and strategic investments rather than traditional employment. I owned commercial real estate, restaurant franchises, and equity stakes in 12 different companies across the Southwest. Despite this success, my living situation remained surprisingly modest. I chose a comfortable townhouse in Desert Ridge rather than a Scottsdale mansion, drove a reliable Toyota Camry instead of a luxury car, and dressed professionally but not ostentatiously. My wealth existed primarily on paper and in business accounts, allowing me to maintain anonymity, while building an empire that most people, including my family, never suspected existed. The irony of my situation became increasingly apparent during family gatherings. While I sat quietly listening to discussions about mortgage payments, school tuition costs, and vacation budgets, I was mentally calculating the daily revenue from businesses I own. When Michael complained about the expense of Emma's gymnastics lessons, or Ashley worried about affording Chloe's preschool, I could have solved their problems with a simple bank transfer. But years of being dismissed and undervalued had created a protective instinct to keep my financial reality private. My family's perception of my life couldn't have been more wrong. They viewed me as the perpetual single woman with a quirky business that probably barely paid the bill. Family conversations often included subtle suggestions about getting serious about my future, finding a stable job with good benefits, or meeting someone who could provide security. The assumption was that my unconventional path meant struggle and uncertainty, while their traditional choices represented wisdom and success. This misconception was reinforced by their complete ignorance about the business world I operated in. When I mentioned consulting projects or investment opportunities, their eyes would glaze over with the kind of polite disinterest reserved for topics they considered either too complicated or irrelevant to their lives. They understood Michael's sales targets and Ashley's patient schedules, but my work remained mysterious and therefore somehow less legitimate. The financial disparity created an increasingly uncomfortable dynamic during family interaction. While my siblings stressed about monthly budgets and planned modest vacations within driving distance, I was quietly managing investment portfolios and reviewing acquisition proposals. The knowledge that I could solve their financial concerns without missing a single payment on my own obligations felt both empowering and isolating. Last spring, when Michael and Sarah were struggling with unexpected medical bills from Tyler's broken arm, I watched them debate whether to dip into their emergency fund or put the expenses on a credit card. The amount they were worried about represented less than an hour of revenue from my restaurant chain, but asking if I could help never crossed their minds. In their worldview, I was the family member who needed assistance, not the one capable of providing it. Similarly, when Ashley and David postponed their anniversary trip because Chloe's daycare costs had increased, I listened to their disappointment while mentally calculating that the vacation they canceled cost less than what my businesses generated during their conversation. The disconnect between their perception of my circumstances and the reality of my financial position grew wider with each family gathering. My parents, Linda and Robert, had retired comfortably but not luxurious. Dad's pension and Mom's teacher retirement provided a solid foundation, but their lifestyle required careful budgeting and occasional sacrifices. They talked frequently about friends who traveled extensively or renovated their homes, luxuries that remained just beyond their comfortable but limited means. During these conversations, they never considered that their supposedly struggling daughter might be in a position to help expand their retirement horizons. The emotional toll of maintaining this facade grew heavier with each family interaction. I genuinely loved spending time with my nieces and nephew, enjoyed holiday traditions, and valued family connections. But the constant undercurrent of being viewed as the family member who hadn't quite figured out her life created a persistent ache that I couldn't shake. Their love felt conditional on my eventually conforming to their expectations, while my actual achievements remained invisible and unappreciated. Over the past year, this tension had escalated into more direct comments about my choices. Family dinners included pointed questions about when I would settle down, suggestions about more stable career options, and barely concealed concerns about my future security. The tone had shifted from gentle encouragement to worried intervention, as if approaching 30 without a husband and children represented some kind of failure that required family rescue. The most painful aspect was their complete inability to see the success I had actually achieved. While they celebrated Michael's latest promotion or Ashley's return to work after maternity leave, my business accomplishments were met with polite nods and subject changes. When I mentioned expanding desert analytics or completing a major consulting project, the response was typically something like, "That's nice, honey," followed immediately by someone else's more relatable update about soccer practice or school fundraising. This dynamic reached a breaking point last month when Uncle Stephen made a comment during Sunday dinner about how some people contribute to family legacy while others just drift through life pursuing hobbies. The implication was clear, and the silence that followed suggested agreement rather than disagreement with his assessment. I excused myself early that evening, driving home through the desert darkness with tears streaming down my face and a growing determination to stop hiding my success behind false modesty. The decision to reveal my true circumstances had been building for months, but I needed the right moment and setting. Family dynamics are delicate, and dropping a bombshell about secret wealth could easily backfire if handled poorly. I wanted a situation where the revelation would be organic, undeniable, and powerful enough to permanently shift their perception of my life and choices. That opportunity presented itself when Michael suggested organizing a family celebration dinner for Dad's 58th birthday. After discussing various restaurant options, Ashley mentioned that Harvest and Table in Scottsdale had become her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her favorite place for special occasions. The food was excellent, the atmosphere was perfect for families, and the service was consistently outstanding. Everyone agreed enthusiastically, with multiple family members sharing positive experiences they'd had at various Harvest and Table locations. As they planned the guest list, menu preferences, and logistics, I listened with growing anticipation. They had unknowingly chosen to celebrate in one of my restaurants, creating the perfect stage for a revelation that would change our family dynamic forever. For the first time in months, I felt excitement rather than dread about an upcoming family gathering. The irony was too perfect to resist, and the timing felt divinely orchestrated. I made the reservation under my name, selected a semi-private dining area that would accommodate our party of 11, and informed the management team that this would be a special family occasion, requiring flawless service. What I didn't mention was that this dinner would also serve as the moment when years of hidden success finally came to light, transforming me from the family's perceived underachiever into someone who demanded a completely different kind of respect. The week leading up to Dad's birthday dinner felt different somehow, charged with an anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. While my family coordinated schedules and discussed gift ideas through our group text, I found myself reviewing Harvest and Table's operational reports with unusual attention to detail. The Scottsdale location was performing exceptionally well, with customer satisfaction scores consistently above 90% and revenue trending upward month over month. The staff had no idea that the woman who occasionally dined alone at table 12, always polite but unremarkable, was actually their ultimate boss. My relationship with the business had been deliberately structured to maintain complete anonymity. All ownership documents were filed under Desert Holdings LLC, with a management company handling day-to-day oversight, and a carefully selected board of directors making operational decisions. The original founders had been retained as consultants, providing continuity while I implemented strategic improvements behind the scenes. Even the executive team believed they reported to a group of East Coast investors who preferred to remain uninvolved in daily operations. This arrangement had served multiple purposes beyond simple privacy. It allowed me to observe genuine customer service and operational efficiency without the artificial politeness that comes with known ownership present. More importantly, it let me maintain my cover story with family and friends, who regularly frequented Harvest and Table locations, without connecting me to the business empire I'd built. The irony of sitting through family dinners where relatives praised the restaurant's management while complaining about my lack of career focus never failed to amaze me. Kevin Martinez, the general manager at the Scottsdale location, had been with the company since before my acquisition. His dedication to excellence and genuine care for both customers and staff made him invaluable to the operation's success. Under his leadership, the restaurant had become a cornerstone of the local dining scene, earning recognition from food critics and building a loyal customer base that included several prominent Phoenix families. He had no idea that his biggest supporter wasn't the mysterious investment group he reported to quarterly, but the quiet young woman who sometimes worked on her laptop in the corner booth during slow Tuesday afternoon. The transformation I'd engineered at Harvest and Table went far beyond financial restructuring. The previous owners had cut costs by reducing portion sizes, using cheaper ingredients, and minimizing staff training programs. Within 6 months of my acquisition, I'd reversed every one of these short-sighted decisions. Menu prices increased modestly while portion sizes returned to generous standards. Local sourcing partnerships were established with organic farms throughout Arizona, ensuring freshness while supporting regional agriculture. Staff compensation packages were enhanced significantly, resulting in dramatically reduced turnover and consistently superior service quality. The investment in employee satisfaction had paid dividends beyond my most optimistic projections. Servers like Brittany Thompson, who'd been struggling to make ends meet under the previous ownership, now earned enough to pursue her master's degree in education, while maintaining her position at the restaurant. The kitchen staff received quarterly bonuses based on customer satisfaction scores, creating a direct correlation between their efforts and financial reward. Word spread throughout Phoenix's restaurant industry that Harvest and Table was an exceptional place to work, allowing us to recruit and retain the most talented professionals in the market. These operational improvements had coincided with an aggressive but carefully planned expansion strategy. Rather than rushing to open new locations, I'd focused on perfecting the model at existing restaurants before considering growth opportunities. Each potential site underwent extensive market analysis, demographic research, and competition assessment before receiving approval for development. The result was a chain of 15 restaurants that felt authentically local while maintaining consistent quality standards that customers could rely on regardless of location. The financial performance exceeded every benchmark I'd established during the acquisition planning phase. Revenue per square foot ranked among the highest in the casual dining sector throughout the Southwest. Customer retention rates consistently outperformed industry averages, with families like mine becoming regular patrons who viewed Harvest and Table as their default choice for special occasions. The combination of excellent food, superior service, and welcoming atmosphere had created something rare in the restaurant industry, a business that generated profits while genuinely enhancing the communities it served. My family's relationship with Harvest and Table had developed organically over the past 2 years, beginning with Ashley's discovery of the Scottsdale location during a girls' night with her college friend. She'd raved about the butternut squash ravioli and the attentive service, recommending it to Mom and Dad for their anniversary dinner. Within months, it had become the family's preferred destination for celebrations, date nights, and casual weekend meal. They'd never once connected their frequent dining experiences with my mysterious business activities, despite my obvious familiarity with the restaurant industry. The conversations during these family meals had provided invaluable insights into customer perspectives and operational effectiveness. I'd listened to Dad praise the consistency of his favorite salmon dish across multiple visits, unknowingly validating the standardized preparation protocols I'd implement. Mom frequently commented on the restaurant's cleanliness and the staff's professionalism, directly reflecting the enhanced training programs and elevated hiring standards that had cost significant money to implement, but clearly delivered measurable results. Michael and Sarah had become particularly attached to the children's menu and the staff's patience with young diners. Emma and Tyler looked forward to visits specifically because servers like Brittany remembered their names and preferences, creating the kind of personalized experience that turned occasional customers into loyal advocates. The kids' excitement about visiting Harvest and Table had become a family joke, with Ashley often teasing that her children cared more about their favorite restaurant than most other activities. This deep family connection to my business created layers of irony that sometimes felt almost surreal. During recent Sunday dinners, conversations frequently included glowing reviews of Harvest and Table's service, food quality, or atmosphere. Michael had suggested hosting Tyler's upcoming birthday party there, while Ashley was considering it for her anniversary celebration with Dave. They discussed the restaurant with the kind of enthusiasm typically reserved for beloved local institutions, never imagining that their supposedly struggling family member was responsible for every positive experience they'd enjoyed. The financial investment required to transform Harvest and Table into the Southwest's premier casual dining destination had been substantial but strategically sound. Kitchen renovations at every location ensured consistent food preparation and presentation. Technology upgrades streamlined ordering processes and inventory management, reducing waste while improving efficiency. Marketing campaigns targeted families and professionals seeking reliable, high-quality dining experiences without the pretension or expense of fine dining establishments. But the most significant investment had been in company culture and employee development. I'd instituted comprehensive training programs that covered everything from food safety and customer service to conflict resolution and career advancement opportunities. Managers attended quarterly leadership seminars, while servers and kitchen staff participated in ongoing education about ingredients, preparation techniques, and dietary accommodations. The result was a workforce that genuinely cared about their jobs and took pride in the restaurant's reputation. These cultural improvements had created a self-reinforcing cycle of excellence that distinguished Harvest and Table from competitors throughout the region. Employees stayed longer, reducing training costs and maintaining consistency. Customer service improved continuously as staff developed relationships with regular patrons. Word-of-mouth recommendations generated organic marketing that was both more effective and less expensive than traditional advertising. The business had achieved that rare combination of financial success and genuine community value that defines truly sustainable enterprises. The expansion into Nevada and New Mexico had followed similar principles, with each new location receiving the same intensive development process that had proven successful in Arizona. Local sourcing partnerships were established in each market, ensuring that the farm-to-table concept remained authentic rather than becoming a hollow marketing slogan. Hiring practices prioritized local talent while maintaining the cultural standards that had made the original locations successful. The result was a regional chain that felt genuinely connected to each community it served. My role as the anonymous owner had allowed me to observe these operations with complete objectivity, unfiltered by the artificial deference that often accompanies known ownership presence. I'd witnessed genuine customer interactions, honest employee conversations, and authentic management decisions that revealed the true character of the business I'd built. This perspective had been invaluable for identifying improvement opportunities and validating strategic decisions that might have been influenced by politics or personal relationships in a more traditional ownership structure. The financial returns from this investment strategy had exceeded my most optimistic projections. Annual revenue from the restaurant chain now represented approximately 60% of my total income, with the remaining 40% coming from consulting fees, real estate investments, and equity stakes in other businesses. The diversified portfolio provided stability while the restaurant operations offered consistent cash flow that funded additional expansion opportunity. Within 5 years, I projected that Harvest and Table could support 30 locations across 4 states, generating enough revenue to fund a comfortable retirement before my 40th birthday. But success in the restaurant industry requires constant vigilance and continuous improvement. Food trends evolve rapidly, customer expectations increase steadily, and competition intensifies as successful concepts attract imitators. I'd spent considerable time studying industry publications, attending trade conferences, and analyzing competitor strategies to ensure that Harvest and Table remained ahead of market development. The upcoming birthday dinner would provide another opportunity to observe our operations through the lens of our most important critics, satisfied customers who expected excellence every time they visited. My family's selection of Harvest and Table for Dad's celebration felt like the universe aligning to create the perfect moment for revelation. They'd chosen to honor him at a restaurant I'd built, praising a business I'd created, while maintaining their belief that I was still struggling to establish myself professionally. The cognitive dissonance between their perception and reality had reached a breaking point that demanded resolution, and this dinner would provide the ideal stage for that long overdue confrontation. The guest list for Dad's birthday celebration had expanded to include not just immediate family but also Uncle Stephen and Aunt Patricia, longtime family friends, the Johnsons, and Dad's former colleague Frank Morrison, with his wife Helen. 11 people total, requiring the private dining area that I'd specifically requested when making the reservation. The intimate setting would ensure that whatever transpired during the evening remained within our extended family circle, avoiding public embarrassment, while maximizing the impact of any revelations that might occur. My anticipation about the dinner had less to do with revenge fantasies and more to do with finally being seen clearly by the people who mattered most to me. For years I'd hidden my success behind modesty and privacy, partly from genuine humility, but increasingly from a defense mechanism against their dismissive attitudes about my choices. The restaurant revelation would force them to confront the reality that their supposedly directionless daughter had built something significant and valuable while they'd been waiting for her to settle down and get serious about her future. The week progressed with typical family coordination chaos, as everyone juggled work schedules, childcare arrangements, and gift planning. Michael had organized a group gift, a premium grill set that Dad had been admiring at Home Depot for months. Ashley was handling dessert coordination with the restaurant, ensuring that Dad's favorite chocolate cake would arrive with appropriate fanfare. Mom was managing logistics, confirming attendance and dietary restrictions, while worrying about everything from parking availability to weather forecasts. Throughout these preparations, I maintained my usual role as the helpful but financially limited family member. When Michael suggested upgrading Dad's gift to include premium accessories, I politely declined to contribute additional money, citing budget constraints that everyone accepted without question. When Ashley asked if I wanted to split the cost of premium wine for the table, I demurred with the kind of careful consideration that suggested money was tight. These small deceptions had become second nature over the years, but they felt increasingly uncomfortable as the dinner approached. The irony of my family organizing a celebration at my own restaurant, while worrying about costs I could easily cover, had reached absurd levels. Dad's birthday gift, which they considered expensive at $200, represented less than 15 minutes of revenue from Harvest and Table on a typical Saturday evening. The wine upgrade that Ashley had proposed would cost less than what the restaurant spent on fresh flowers for table arrangements each week. Their careful budgeting for an evening that would barely register as a rounding error in my monthly profit statements highlighted the vast gap between their perception of my circumstances and the financial reality I'd been hiding. Saturday afternoon arrived with the kind of perfect Arizona weather that makes living in the desert worthwhile. Clear skies, 78 degrees, and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of orange blossoms from nearby groves. I spent the morning reviewing quarterly reports from all 15 Harvest and Table locations, noting with satisfaction that customer satisfaction scores remained consistently high across the entire chain. The Scottsdale location where we'd be dining that evening ranked second in overall performance, with particularly strong ratings for food quality and service attentiveness. My preparation for the evening felt different from typical family gatherings. Instead of the usual anxiety about enduring subtle criticisms and well-meaning suggestions about my life choices, I felt calm anticipation about finally sharing the truth about my success. The revelation wouldn't be vindictive or mean-spirited, but it would be undeniable and transformative. Years of being underestimated and dismissed were about to end in the most dramatic way possible. As 6 o'clock approached, I dressed carefully in a simple but elegant navy dress that struck the right balance between family dinner and business casual. Professional enough to command respect, but not so formal as to seem out of place at a birthday celebration. I chose jewelry that was tasteful but unremarkable, maintaining the modest appearance that had served as camouflage for so long. Tonight would be the last time I would need to downplay my success to avoid uncomfortable family dynamic. The drive to Scottsdale took me through neighborhoods where I'd grown up, past the high school where I'd first dreamed of building my own business, and eventually into the upscale area, where Harvest and Table had become a cornerstone of the local dining scene. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed Dad's familiar sedan and Michael's SUV already there, indicating that I was the last family member to arrive. Perfect timing for what I hoped would be a memorable evening that changed everything between us. Walking through the entrance of Harvest and Table that evening felt like stepping into a parallel universe where I was simultaneously insider and outsider, owner and guest, family member and stranger. The hostess, Maria, greeted me with the same warm professionalism she showed every customer, having no idea that the woman checking in for the Martinez party was actually her ultimate employer. The familiar sounds of dinner service filled the air. The gentle clinking of silverware against plates, the soft murmur of conversation, and the occasional laugh that indicated satisfied diners enjoying their evening. The restaurant had never looked better. Fresh white orchids adorned each table, their elegant stems rising from simple glass vases that caught the warm amber lighting perfectly. The open kitchen concept allowed glimpses of the culinary team working in synchronized harmony, each movement purposeful and efficient. Local artwork from Phoenix artists decorated the walls, featuring desert landscapes and southwestern themes that connected diners to the regional character I'd insisted upon during the renovation process. Everything about the atmosphere spoke to the careful balance between sophistication and accessibility that had become Harvest and Table's signature. Maria led me through the main dining room toward the private area where my family had already gathered. As we walked, I noticed details that most customers would miss but that filled me with quiet pride. The servers moved with confidence and genuine warmth, engaging customers in conversations that went beyond mere order take. The kitchen staff maintained impeccable standards, with each plate leaving the pass looking like a photograph from a food magazine. The ambient noise level was perfectly calibrated, lively enough to create energy but subdued enough to allow intimate conversation. The private dining area had been arranged exactly as I'd specified when making the reservation. A long rectangular table accommodated 11 place settings, with Dad's chair positioned at the head where he could see the entire party. Fresh flowers created a centerpiece that was elegant without being ostentatious, and the lighting was warm enough to be flattering but bright enough for easy conversation. Every detail reflected the attention to customer experience that had made Harvest and Table successful, though my family attributed these touches to good management rather than ownership that prioritized guest satisfaction above profit margin. Dad looked genuinely touched by the gathering, his eyes bright with the kind of happiness that comes from being surrounded by people who matter most. He wore his favorite navy blazer and the tie Mom had given him for Christmas, clearly having made an effort to dress appropriately for the occasion. Mom sat beside him in a floral dress I'd never seen before, probably purchased specifically for this celebration. Their obvious pleasure at being honored with a family dinner created a warmth in the room that temporarily overshadowed my growing anticipation about what the evening would reveal. Michael and Sarah had arrived early with Emma and Tyler, who were already examining the children's menu with the kind of serious concentration that only 8-year-olds can bring to important decisions. Emma was explaining to Tyler why the chicken strips were superior to the mini burgers, while Tyler argued for the mac and cheese based on previous positive experience. Their animated discussion about food preferences highlighted one of the many details I'd insisted upon when developing the children's menu: options that kids actually wanted to eat rather than adult dishes in smaller portions. Ashley and David were engaged in conversation with Uncle Stephen and Aunt Patricia about recent changes in the neighborhood, while their daughter Chloe sat quietly coloring in the activity book that Brittany had thoughtfully provided. The family friends, Frank and Helen Morrison, were admiring the restaurant's decor and commenting on the excellent reputation Harvest and Table had developed throughout Scottsdale. Their obvious appreciation for the ambiance and attention to detail validated every decision I'd made about creating an atmosphere that enhanced rather than competed with family celebration. Brittany approached our table with the kind of genuine enthusiasm that distinguished exceptional servers from those simply going through motion. She'd worked at Harvest and Table for almost 2 years, during which time she'd become one of our most requested servers due to her ability to make every guest feel personally welcome. Her bright smile and confident demeanor reflected the comprehensive training program I'd implemented, which emphasized authentic hospitality over scripted interaction. She had no idea that the young woman sitting quietly at the end of the table was responsible for the working conditions and compensation package that had allowed her to thrive professionally while pursuing her education. The evening began with the kind of easy conversation that characterizes comfortable family relationships. Dad shared stories about his early career challenges, drawing parallels to current workplace dynamics that resonated with Michael's recent promotion experience. Mom updated everyone on her volunteer work with the literacy program, describing recent success stories that had her glowing with satisfaction. Ashley discussed Chloe's progress in preschool, while Emma and Tyler entertained the adults with their observations about teachers, classmates, and playground politics. I participated in these conversations with genuine interest, asking questions and sharing appropriate responses while maintaining the role I'd played for years: the supportive family member whose own life was somehow less substantial than everyone else's achievement. The irony of sitting in my own restaurant, surrounded by employees whose livelihoods I'd improved, while being viewed as the family member who hadn't quite found her direction, felt increasingly surreal as the evening progressed. The food arrived with the kind of perfect timing and presentation that reflected months of staff training and system refinement. Dad's favorite salmon was cooked exactly to his preference, with the herb crust golden and the interior flaky and moist. Mom's butternut squash ravioli looked like a work of art, each pasta pillow perfectly shaped and the sauce drizzled with the kind of precision that Instagram food photographers dream about. The children's meals arrived simultaneously with the adults, preventing the restless waiting that can derail family dinners and demonstrating the kitchen coordination that had taken considerable effort to perfect. Uncle Stephen raised his wine glass to toast Dad's 58th birthday, launching into a heartfelt speech about family legacy and the importance of building something meaningful to pass down to future generations. His words carried particular weight given his own success as a commercial real estate developer, and the family listened respectfully as he outlined Dad's contributions as a father, husband, and community member. The toast was genuinely moving, focusing on Dad's dedication to family values and his role as a positive influence on the next generation. As applause died down and conversation resumed, the topics gradually shifted toward more personal territory. Frank Morrison, Dad's former colleague, began discussing retirement planning and the challenges of maintaining lifestyle expectations on fixed income. This led to broader conversations about financial responsibility, career choices, and the different paths family members had taken to achieve security and satisfaction. The discussion remained friendly and general until Uncle Stephen, perhaps emboldened by his second glass of wine, began making observations about modern career trends and generational differences. His comments started innocuously enough, focusing on how young professionals today seem to prioritize flexibility and personal fulfillment over traditional markers of success like home ownership and family formation. But as he warmed to his theme, the observations became more pointed and personal. He talked about the importance of contributing to family legacy through concrete achievements, rather than chasing uncertain ventures that might never materialize into real security. The subtle shift in tone suggested that these weren't abstract observations, but carefully veiled criticisms directed toward specific family members. Mom tried to redirect the conversation toward safer topics, asking Helen Morrison about their recent trip to Colorado, and complimenting the restaurant's excellent service. But Uncle Stephen seemed determined to make his point, possibly feeling that Dad's birthday dinner provided an appropriate forum for sharing wisdom about life priorities and family responsibility. His next comments addressed the need for family members to support each other through practical contributions, rather than empty encouragement of unrealistic dreams. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as his meaning became unmistakable. While he didn't mention names, everyone present understood exactly who he was referring to when he discussed family members who seemed to drift through life without accepting adult responsibilities or making meaningful contributions to the family's collective wealth. The children continued eating their meals, oblivious to the undercurrents developing among the adults, but every grown-up at the table recognized the direction this conversation was heading. Dad's expression grew uncomfortable as he realized that his birthday celebration was becoming a platform for family criticism that he hadn't intended or requested. Mom shot warning glances at her brother-in-law, clearly hoping he would recognize the inappropriate timing and change subject. Michael and Ashley exchanged looks that suggested they were caught between agreeing with Uncle Stephen's sentiments and feeling uncomfortable about the public nature of his observation. The Morrisons focused intently on their meals, trying to avoid involvement in family dynamics that didn't concern them. But Uncle Stephen, perhaps misinterpreting the silence as agreement or encouragement, doubled down on his theme. He began discussing specific examples of young adults who had disappointed their families by pursuing impractical careers instead of settling down and accepting conventional responsibility. His voice carried the kind of authority that comes from financial success and community standing, making his judgments seem like established wisdom rather than personal opinions. The implicit criticism became increasingly difficult to ignore or deflect. Ashley attempted to change the subject by asking Brittany about dessert options, but Uncle Stephen continued his monologue about family responsibilities and realistic expectations. He talked about the importance of recognizing when dreams need to be abandoned in favor of practical choices that serve the greater good of family stability. His words carried the weight of someone who believed his own success gave him the right to evaluate and critique other people's life decisions, regardless of how little he actually knew about their circumstance. The breaking point came when Uncle Stephen turned his attention directly toward me, abandoning any pretense of speaking in generalities. He fixed me with the kind of patronizing look typically reserved for children who need correction and began discussing the importance of family members contributing their fair share to collective celebrations and responsibility. His tone suggested that my presence at the dinner was somehow charity provided by more successful relatives, and that my contribution to Dad's birthday celebration was inadequate compared to the efforts made by family members with real careers and genuine responsibility. Dad's face flushed with embarrassment as he realized that his birthday dinner had become a platform for humiliating one of his daughters. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but Uncle Stephen was building momentum and seemed determined to complete his point. The rest of the family sat in stunned silence, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the criticism but uncertain how to intervene without creating an even more awkward scene. The atmosphere had shifted from celebration to confrontation in a matter of minutes. Uncle Stephen's final comment cut through the air like a blade, sharp and unmistakable in its intent to wound. He suggested that since some family members seemed incapable of contributing meaningfully to family gatherings, perhaps it was time for them to step up financially instead of expecting others to carry the burden of celebration costs. The implication was clear: since I couldn't contribute through marriage, children, or career success, the least I could do was pay for dinner. His words hung in the air like smoke, poisonous and impossible to ignore. The silence that followed felt eternal, broken only by the gentle sounds of other diners enjoying their meals in the main restaurant. Emma asked Tyler to pass the ketchup, her innocent request highlighting the contrast between childhood simplicity and adult cruelty. Chloe continued coloring, unaware that her aunt was being publicly humiliated at what was supposed to be a family celebration. The servers continued their professional duties, maintaining the excellent service standards that had made Harvest and Table successful while remaining appropriately oblivious to the family drama unfolding in their private dining area. I felt the familiar flush of humiliation rise in my cheeks, the same burning sensation I'd experienced countless times during family gatherings, when my choices were questioned and my contributions minimized. But something different happened this time. Instead of the usual defensive retreat into apologetic explanations about my unconventional career path, I felt a cold clarity settle over me like armor. Years of hidden success suddenly felt like a weapon I'd been unconsciously preparing to use at exactly this moment. The revelation was about to unfold in ways that Uncle Stephen and everyone else at the table could never have anticipated. As I reached for my phone with steady hands, I realized that this humiliation would be the catalyst for the most satisfying moment of my adult life. The family was about to learn exactly who they'd been underestimating all these years, and the lesson would unfold in the most dramatic and undeniable way possible. The quiet daughter they'd dismissed as unsuccessful was about to reveal that she owned every inch of the restaurant where they sat, every fork they held, and every bite of food they'd enjoyed. The balance of power was about to shift permanently, and Uncle Stephen's cruel words would become the trigger for a transformation that would change our family dynamic forever. My fingers found my phone with the kind of deliberate calm that comes from absolute certainty about what needs to happen next. The humiliation burning in my chest had transformed into something cooler and more powerful, the crystalline clarity that emerges when years of patient endurance finally reach their breaking point. Uncle Stephen's words still echoed in the private dining room, his suggestion that I should pay for dinner because I couldn't contribute anything meaningful to the family hanging in the air like an accusation that demanded respect. I unlocked my phone and opened the secure app that connected me directly to Harvest and Table's management system. With a few quick taps, I accessed the real-time dashboard that showed every aspect of tonight's operations across all 15 locations. The Scottsdale restaurant where we sat was performing exceptionally well, with table turnover running smoothly and customer satisfaction scores maintaining their consistently high levels. Revenue for the evening was tracking ahead of projections, driven by the kind of excellent service and food quality that had made this chain the Southwest's premier casual dining destination. The irony of Uncle Stephen's demand couldn't have been more perfect. He wanted me to pay for dinner at my own restaurant in the private dining room I'd personally designed, eating food prepared according to recipes I'd approved, served by staff whose wages I'd substantially increased. The cosmic justice of the moment felt almost too perfect to be coincidental, as if the universe had orchestrated this confrontation to provide the most dramatic possible revelation of truth. I took a slow sip of water, allowing the silence to stretch while I considered exactly how to handle this revelation. The nuclear option would be to immediately announce my ownership and watch the family's shocked reactions unfold in real time. The more sophisticated approach would be to let Uncle Stephen dig himself deeper into his position before revealing how spectacularly wrong his assumptions had been. Given his commitment to humiliating me publicly, I decided he deserved the full treatment. "You're absolutely right, Uncle Stephen," I said, my voice carrying just enough resignation to sound convincing. "I should definitely be the one paying for tonight's dinner." The family exchanged glances that mixed relief with uncomfortable acknowledgement that his harsh criticism had apparently hit its target. Dad looked particularly pained, clearly wishing this confrontation hadn't happened during his birthday celebration, but uncertain how to repair the damage without making things worse. Mom reached across the table to pat my hand sympathetically, her expression conveying both support and disappointment that I hadn't developed the backbone to defend myself more effectively. Michael and Sarah maintained the kind of careful neutrality that suggested they agreed with Uncle Stephen's assessment, but preferred not to participate directly in my humiliation. Ashley bit her lip nervously, torn between family loyalty and her own frustration with my apparent lack of ambition and direction. Uncle Stephen nodded with satisfaction, clearly pleased that his tough love approach had achieved the desired result without requiring more brutal honesty than he'd already delivered. "I'm glad you understand, Jessica," he said, his tone softening slightly now that victory had been achieved. "Sometimes family members need to hear difficult truths about their choices and responsibilities. We all want what's best for you, but that means accepting reality about where you stand in life." I smiled and pulled out my phone again, this time opening the contacts app with theatrical deliberation. "You know what? Let me call Kevin right now and arrange to take care of the check." The family looked puzzled by this announcement, Clearly wondering who Kevin was and why I would need to call someone to arrange payment for dinner. Uncle Stephen's expression suggested mild impatience with what he perceived as unnecessary drama around a simple financial transaction. Kevin Martinez is the general manager here, I explained, scrolling through my contacts with exaggerated care. I want to make sure he knows that the Martinez family party will be receiving some very special treatment tonight. The mention of the manager's name caught Dad's attention, since they'd interacted with Kevin during previous visits and appreciated his professionalism and attention to detail. I pressed Kevin's number and activated the speaker function, setting the phone on the table where everyone could hear the conversation. The family watched with growing confusion as the phone rang twice before Kevin's familiar voice answered with his standard professional greeting. "Good evening, this is Kevin Martinez from Harvest and Table, Scottsdale. How can I assist you tonight?" "Kevin, this is Jessica Anderson," I said, maintaining eye contact with Uncle Stephen while speaking clearly enough for the entire table to hear. "I'm currently dining in your private room with my family and I wanted to discuss the billing arrangements for tonight's celebration." The family's expressions shifted from confusion to curiosity as they tried to understand why I would have the general manager's direct phone number and why he would take my call immediately during the dinner rush. Kevin's voice brightened noticeably, though he maintained his professional tone. "Of course, Miss Anderson. Is everything meeting your expectations this evening? I've been monitoring your table personally to ensure perfect service for your father's birthday celebration." The family exchanged glances of surprise at the level of attention their dinner was apparently receiving, though they still hadn't grasped the full significance of Kevin's deferential tone. "Everything has been absolutely flawless, as always," I replied, allowing just enough emphasis on the word always to plant seeds of questions in my family's minds. "The service, the food quality, the attention to detail, everything reflects exactly the standards I expect from this location." Uncle Stephen's forehead creased slightly as he began to sense that this conversation was heading in an unexpected direction. "I'm delighted to hear that," Kevin responded warmly. "Your satisfaction with our operations means everything to the entire team here. Now, regarding the billing arrangements for this evening, would you prefer to handle this through the usual corporate channels, or should I process everything directly through your personal account?" The silence that fell over our table was profound and electric. Every family member had frozen in place, forks halfway to mouths and wine glasses suspended in midair, as the implications of Kevin's words began to penetrate their consciousness. Uncle Stephen's face had gone pale, his confident smirk replaced by dawning comprehension that something fundamental about this situation was not what he had assumed. "Actually, Kevin, let's handle this differently tonight," I continued, savoring every word while maintaining direct eye contact with Uncle Stephen. "I want you to personally come to our table so I can introduce you to my family. They've been enjoying Harvest and Table for years, but I don't think they fully understand the relationship between the restaurant and their supposedly unsuccessful daughter." The pause that followed Kevin's acknowledgement felt like an eternity compressed into seconds. Dad's mouth had fallen open slightly, while Mom's eyes darted between my face and the phone as if trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Michael leaned forward in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to something approaching realization. Ashley had gone completely still, her fork suspended above her plate as the conversation's implications began to register. Kevin's footsteps approached our private dining area within minutes, his professional bearing and confident stride commanding attention from every family member present. He appeared in the doorway wearing the kind of respectful expression typically reserved for very important customers, his eyes immediately seeking mine for direction about how to proceed. The family watched his approach with growing bewilderment, clearly struggling to understand why the restaurant's general manager was treating their supposedly struggling family member with such obvious deference. "Good evening, everyone," Kevin said, his voice carrying the perfect balance of warmth and professionalism that had made him invaluable to Harvest and Table's success. "I hope you're all enjoying your celebration this evening. Miss Anderson, thank you for allowing me to meet your family. It's an honor to finally put faces to the names I've heard so much about during our quarterly meetings." Uncle Stephen's wine glass hit the table with a sharp clink as the word quarterly meetings
penetrated his consciousness like a physical blow. The family stared at Kevin with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror as they began to piece together the implications of his respectful tone and obvious familiarity with me. The children continued eating their meals, blissfully unaware that the adult world around them was experiencing a seismic shift in understanding. "Kevin, I'd like you to meet my father Robert, whose birthday we're celebrating tonight," I said, gesturing toward Dad with a smile that felt genuinely warm for the first time all evening. "And this is my Uncle Stephen, who was just explaining to everyone how I should be the one paying for dinner tonight since I don't contribute anything meaningful to our family gathering." Kevin's eyebrows rose slightly as he processed this information, his expression shifting to reflect appropriate concern about a valued customer being disrespected. "I see," he said carefully, clearly recognizing the delicate family dynamics at play while maintaining his professional composure. "Well, I can certainly arrange for Miss Anderson to handle tonight's billing, though I should mention that as the owner of Harvest and Table she never actually pays for meals at any of our locations." The word owner detonated in the private dining room like a verbal bomb, instantly vaporizing every assumption and preconception my family had maintained about my life for the past several years. Uncle Stephen's face cycled through several colors before settling on a sickly gray that suggested his digestive system was rebelling against the evening's revelation. Dad's expression showed pure shock mixed with something that might have been pride, while Mom's eyes filled with tears that could have been joy, embarrassment, or a combination of both. Michael's fork clattered to his plate as he stared at me with the kind of expression typically reserved for discovering that your quiet neighbor was actually a secret agent. Ashley's mouth had formed a perfect circle of surprise, her eyes wide with the dawning realization that every assumption she'd made about my financial circumstances had been spectacularly wrong. The Morrisons looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs, clearly regretting their attendance at what had become a very private family revelation. "That's correct," I said, my voice steady and clear as I addressed the stunned faces around the table. "I own Harvest and Table, all 15 locations across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. The farm-to-table concept, the employee training programs, the expansion strategy, everything you've enjoyed about this restaurant exists because I built it from a failing business into the Southwest's most successful casual dining chain." The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle sounds of normal dinner service continuing in the main restaurant, where other families were enjoying their meals without experiencing earth-shattering revelations about hidden business empire. Emma looked up from her chicken strips to ask Tyler if he wanted to share his dessert, her innocent question highlighting the contrast between childhood simplicity and the complex adult drama unfolding around her. Kevin cleared his throat diplomatically, clearly recognizing that his presence was no longer required for this family conversation. "Ms. Anderson, should I arrange for tonight's celebration to be comped as usual, or would you prefer different arrangements given the circumstance?" His question was carefully neutral, avoiding any suggestion about how I should handle the billing while providing me with complete flexibility to make whatever statement felt appropriate. "Actually, Kevin, let's do something special tonight," I replied, maintaining eye contact with Uncle Stephen while speaking. "I want you to bring out our finest bottle of champagne, the Dom Perignon 2010 that we reserve for our most significant celebration."
Tonight marks the end of my family, thinking I'm a financial burden, so this definitely qualifies as a milestone worthy of premium champagne. Uncle Stephen's face had progressed from gray to green, his earlier confidence replaced by obvious nausea as the full implications of his behavior began to register. He'd publicly humiliated someone who wasn't just successful but who owned the very restaurant where he'd chosen to deliver his cruel assessment of her life choices. The cosmic justice of the situation was so perfect that it almost seemed scripted, though the genuine shock and embarrassment on his face confirmed that this revelation was completely unexpected. Dad found his voice first, though it came out as more of a croak than actual speech. "Jessica, honey, you own this restaurant? The whole chain? But how is that possible? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?" His questions tumbled over each other, reflecting the mental whiplash of having his fundamental understanding of his daughter's life completely overturned in a matter of minutes. "I've owned Harvest and Table for almost 3 years now, Dad," I explained, my tone gentle but firm. I bought it when it was failing, and transformed it into what you see today. Every meal you've enjoyed here, every compliment you've given about the service and food quality, every time you've recommended this place to friends, you were praising something I built while simultaneously telling me I needed to get serious about my career. Mom's tears had started flowing freely, though whether from pride, embarrassment, or relief was impossible to determine. But why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were struggling? We could have been supporting you instead of worrying about your future. Her voice carried the kind of pain that comes from realizing you've been hurting someone you love through ignorance rather than malice. Because every time I tried to share my business success, you changed the subject or suggested I needed to find something more stable and conventional, I replied, my words carrying years of accumulated frustration. When I mentioned consulting projects or investment opportunities, your eyes would glaze over. When I celebrated professional achievements, you responded with concerns about when I'd settle down and start a real career. It became easier to let you maintain your assumptions than to keep fighting for recognition that never came. Ashley had found her voice, though it sounded small and uncertain. But Jessica, we had no idea you were making real money. You always seemed so careful about expenses, declining to split costs for gifts and dinners. We thought you were barely getting by. Her observation highlighted one of the many ironies of the situation. My modesty about spending had been interpreted as financial limitation rather than deliberate choice. I was careful about expenses because I was building a business empire, not because I couldn't afford to contribute, I explained. Every dollar I didn't spend on unnecessary luxuries was reinvested into acquisitions and expansion. While you were worrying about my financial security, I was creating enough wealth to retire comfortably before 40. The careful budgeting you mistook for poverty was actually disciplined wealth building. Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from shock to something approaching respect. Jesus, Jess, you've been sitting through family dinners where we complained about money problems while you could have solved all of them with a single bank transfer. That must have been incredibly frustrating. His acknowledgement felt like the first genuine recognition I'd received from my family in years. Frustrating doesn't begin to cover it, I admit. Listening to conversations about mortgage concerns, tuition worries and vacation budgets, while knowing I generate more revenue in a week than most families earn in a year. Yes, it was challenging, but what hurt more was the constant suggestion that my life choices were somehow inadequate, or immature, compared to yours. Uncle Stephen finally managed to speak, though his voice sounded hollow and defeated. Jessica, I owe you an enormous apology. I had no idea about any of this. My comments tonight were completely out of line, and I'm mortified by my behavior. His contrition appeared genuine, though it was clearly motivated by the shocking revelation about my actual circumstances, rather than any recognition that his criticism had been inappropriate regardless of my financial status. Your apology is noted, Uncle Stephen, but the real issue isn't that you misjudged my financial success, I replied, my tone remaining steady but firm. The problem is that you felt entitled to publicly humiliate me based on your assumptions about my life choice, whether I'm wealthy or struggling, whether I'm married or single, whether I have children or don't. None of that justifies the kind of treatment you delivered tonight. Kevin reappeared with the Dom Perignon and appropriate glasses, his professional demeanor intact despite clearly overhearing portions of our family conversation. He opened the champagne with expert precision, the cork's soft pop punctuating the emotional intensity of our discussion. As he poured the golden liquid into each glass, the ritual felt simultaneously celebratory and solemn, marking both a revelation and a reckoning. I'd like to propose a toast, I said, raising my champagne glass while maintaining eye contact with each family member in turn, to the end of assumptions, the beginning of honest communication, and the hope that our family relationships can be rebuilt on mutual respect, rather than misguided perceptions about each other's choices and contributions. The family raised their glasses with varying degrees of enthusiasm and comfort. Dad's hand shook slightly as he lifted his champagne, while Mom continued dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Michael and Ashley exchanged glances that suggested they were still processing the magnitude of the evening's revelation. Uncle Stephen participated in the toast with obvious reluctance, clearly struggling with the knowledge that his harsh judgment had been directed at someone far more successful than himself. As we sipped the premium champagne, the atmosphere in the private dining room began to shift from confrontation to conversation. The initial shock of my revelation was giving way to curiosity about the details of my business success and questions about why I had chosen to keep my achievements private for so long. The children had finished their meals and were growing restless, providing natural opportunities for lighter topics and gradual emotional decompression. "Can we see the restaurant?" Emma asked, her innocent curiosity breaking through the adult tension that had dominated the evening. "If Aunt Jessica owns this place, can we see where they make the food?" Her request highlighted one of the few positive aspects of the evening's drama, the children's excitement about their aunt's unexpected status as a successful business owner. Kevin overheard Emma's question and immediately offered to provide a brief tour of the kitchen and operations areas, assuming I approved of the idea. The prospect of showing my nieces and nephew around the restaurant I'd built felt like an opportunity to end the evening on a more positive note, allowing the family to see tangible evidence of my success, while giving everyone time to process the emotional revelations that had unfolded during dinner. The kitchen tour revealed the professional-grade equipment, meticulous organization, and high cleanliness standards that had made Harvest and Table successful. The children were fascinated by the size of the industrial ovens and the speed with which the culinary team prepared multiple orders simultaneously. Emma asked intelligent questions about food preparation, while Tyler was impressed by the coordination required to manage so many different tasks at once. Chloe remained close to Ashley, overwhelmed by the busy environment, but clearly intrigued by the revelation that her aunt was responsible for everything they were seeing. The adult family members observed the kitchen operations with new understanding, recognizing the complexity and investment required to create the seamless dining experience they'd enjoyed as customers. Dad asked thoughtful questions about staffing levels and training requirements, his business background allowing him to appreciate the management challenges involved in running such a sophisticated operation. Mom focused on the fresh ingredients and preparation techniques, her teacher's mind naturally curious about the educational aspects of professional food service. As the tour concluded and we returned to our table for coffee and dessert, the conversation gradually became more natural and less charged with emotional intensity. The initial shock of my revelation was settling into acceptance, allowing space for genuine curiosity about my business journey and future plans. Uncle Stephen remained subdued and clearly embarrassed, but the rest of the family seemed eager to understand how I had achieved such success while maintaining complete secrecy about my accomplishments. "What's next for you, Jess?" Michael asked as we shared dessert and coffee. "I mean, if you own 15 restaurants, and you're not even 30 yet, what are your long-term goals?" His question reflected genuine interest in my future rather than the dismissive concern that had characterized previous family conversations about my career. "Expansion into California and Texas markets is the immediate priority," I replied, grateful for the opportunity to discuss my business plans with family members, who were finally listening with respect rather than condescension. "The model we've perfected here in Arizona translates well to other southwestern markets, and there's significant demand for the farm-to-table concept in urban areas throughout the region." The conversation continued for another hour, covering topics ranging from business strategy and investment philosophy to work-life balance and personal fulfillment. For the first time in years, I felt like a valued and respected member of my family rather than a source of concern or disappointment. The evening that had begun with public humiliation had transformed into genuine connection based on honest communication and mutual respect. As we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside for a private conversation. His eyes were still red from the emotional intensity of the evening, but his voice was steady and sincere. "Jessica, I owe you a tremendous apology for not seeing who you really are and what you've accomplished. Your mother and I have been so focused on our expectations about traditional success that we completely missed the extraordinary success you were building right in front of us." "Thank you, Dad. That means more to me than you know," I replied, feeling genuinely moved by his acknowledgement. "But going forward, I hope we can build our relationship on who I actually am, rather than who you think I should become. I'm proud of my choices and my achievements, and I need my family to respect that even when my path looks different from yours." "Absolutely," he agreed, pulling me into a hug that felt warmer and more genuine than any we'd shared in years. "I'm incredibly proud of you, and I'm sorry it took such a dramatic revelation for me to see what should have been obvious all along. You've built something amazing, and you did it entirely on your own terms." The ride home through the desert night felt different from any drive I'd taken after a family gathering. Instead of the usual mixture of frustration and sadness that followed evenings spent defending my life choices, I felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. The secret I'd carried for years was finally revealed. The relationships that had been strained by misunderstanding could begin healing, and my family's perception of my life had been permanently transformed. 3 months later, our family dynamics had evolved into something healthier and more authentic than anything we'd experienced during my adult life. Sunday dinners became genuine celebrations where everyone's achievements were recognized and respected. My business success was acknowledged and discussed with the same interest previously reserved for Michael's promotions and Ashley's parenting milestone. Uncle Stephen had made multiple attempts to apologize and rebuild our relationship, though the memory of his cruel behavior continued to influence our interactions. Most importantly, I no longer felt compelled to hide my success or minimize my achievements to avoid family discomfort. When Harvest and Table expanded into 2 new markets, the family celebrated with genuine pride and excitement. When I was featured in a regional business magazine as one of the Southwest's most promising young entrepreneurs, Mom framed the article and displayed it prominently in their living room. The recognition and respect I'd craved for years had finally materialized, creating space for authentic relationships based on mutual appreciation rather than misguided assumption. The restaurant chain continued thriving under my leadership, with customer satisfaction scores remaining consistently high and expansion plans proceeding ahead of schedule. The success I'd built in secrecy was now public knowledge within my family, allowing me to discuss challenges and opportunities with people who finally understood the significance of my work. The isolation that had characterized my business journey was replaced by genuine support and interest from family members who had learned to value achievement regardless of whether it followed traditional patterns. Looking back on that transformative evening at Harvest and Table, I realized that Uncle Stephen's cruel words had actually provided the perfect catalyst for revealing truth that had been hidden too long. His attempt to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly, creating the dramatic moment needed to shatter years of misunderstanding and establish new foundations for family relationships. Sometimes the most painful confrontations lead to the most necessary conversations, and sometimes the people who try to diminish us inadvertently provide the opportunities we need to finally be seen clearly. The lesson learned that night extended far beyond my personal family situation. It highlighted the danger of making assumptions about other people's lives based on limited information and surface observations. It demonstrated the importance of recognizing and respecting different definitions of success and fulfillment. Most importantly, it proved that sometimes standing up for yourself requires dramatic gestures that force others to confront their own prejudices and misconceptions. 6 months after the revelation, Harvest and Table had expanded to 22 locations across 4 states. My family relationships had never been stronger, and I had learned the value of authentic communication over protective secrecy. The woman who had been dismissed as unsuccessful and directionless was now recognized as the accomplished entrepreneur she had always been, and the family that had underestimated her had learned to appreciate achievements that didn't fit their traditional expectations. The birthday dinner that had begun with humiliation had ended with transformation, proving that sometimes the most unexpected moments provide the greatest opportunities for growth and understanding. Uncle Stephen's demand that I pay for dinner had been granted in the most spectacular way possible. I owned the restaurant, the food, the service, and ultimately, the moment that changed everything between us forever. The morning after the revelation dinner, I woke up in my Desert Ridge townhouse, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my bedroom, illuminating the view of the Sonoran Desert that stretched toward the distant mountain. For the first time since building my business empire, I didn't feel the weight of maintaining a double life or the exhaustion that comes from constantly downplaying success to avoid family discomfort. The secret that had shaped every family interaction for 3 years was finally out, and the relief was overwhelming. My phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout the night with text messages from family members, each processing the previous evening's revelations in their own way. Dad had sent a lengthy message at 2 in the morning, clearly unable to sleep as he worked through his emotions about discovering his daughter's extraordinary success. His text was filled with pride, regret and amazement, cycling through apologies for not recognizing my achievements and expressions of wonder at the empire I'd built while living so modestly. Mom's messages were shorter but more frequent, arriving every hour or so as new questions occurred to her. She wanted to understand the timeline of my business development, the specific challenges I'd overcome, and most importantly, why I'd felt the need to keep everything secret for so long. Her teacher's instincts were engaged, treating my revelation like a complex problem that required careful analysis and understanding rather than simple acceptance. Michael had sent a single message that managed to capture both his shock and his newfound respect. I need to completely recalibrate everything I thought I knew about my little sister. Proud of you, Jess. Also slightly terrified of how much you've been underestimated by all of us. His acknowledgement felt particularly meaningful given our complicated sibling dynamic and his previous dismissive attitude toward my unconventional career path. Ashley's texts were characteristically emotional and stream of consciousness, jumping between excitement about my success, embarrassment about her previous assumptions, and curiosity about what this revelation meant for our future family relationship. She'd also included several questions about whether I needed employees at my restaurants, suggesting that her part-time dental hygienist schedule might benefit from supplemental income in food service. Even Uncle Stephen had sent a message, though his was formal and carefully worded like a business communication rather than a personal note. His text acknowledged his inappropriate behavior, expressed genuine remorse for his assumptions and cruel comments, and requested an opportunity to make amends for what he now recognized as a serious misjudgment of character and circumstance. The formality of his language suggested he was still processing the magnitude of his error. I spent the morning reviewing operational reports from all 22 Harvest and Table locations, a weekly routine that had become both professional necessity and personal satisfaction. The numbers continued to exceed projections across every metric that mattered: customer satisfaction scores, employee retention rates, revenue per square foot, and profit margin. The business model I'd developed was proving sustainable and scalable, with each new location achieving profitability faster than industry standards suggested was possible. The Scottsdale location where last night's drama had unfolded was performing particularly well, with customer reviews from the weekend specifically mentioning the exceptional service and attention to detail they'd experienced. Several diners had posted social media photos of their meals, praising everything from food presentation to the warm atmosphere that made Harvest and Table their preferred destination for family celebration. None of them knew they'd been dining in the same restaurant where a family's understanding of success and achievement had been permanently transformed. Kevin Martinez called around 10 in the morning to debrief about the previous evening and ensure that my family's revelation hadn't created any operational concern. His professionalism impressed me as always, as he managed to address both my personal satisfaction with how the situation had been handled and his concern about maintaining excellent service standards for all customers. We discussed the upcoming expansion plans and reviewed staffing projections for the new California locations scheduled to open within 6 months. Ms. Anderson, if you don't mind me saying so, your family seemed genuinely shocked by the ownership revelation, Kevin observed during our conversation. I hope everything worked out positively after I left your table. His discretion and concern reflected the management qualities that had made him invaluable to Harvest and Table's success, balancing personal interest with professional boundary. It worked out better than I could have hoped, Kevin, I replied honestly. My family needed to understand who I really am and what I've actually accomplished. Last night provided that opportunity in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. I appreciated his concern while recognizing that family dynamics weren't his responsibility beyond ensuring excellent customer service. The conversation shifted to business matters, including the final site selection for our first Texas location and the recruitment strategy for management positions in new markets. Kevin had developed into one of my most trusted advisors, with insights about operational efficiency and customer experience that had shaped Harvest and Table's expansion strategy. His promotion to regional operations director was already in planning stages,
recognizing both his contributions and the leadership pipeline needed for continued growth. By noon, the family group text had evolved into planning for a follow-up gathering where we could discuss the previous evening's revelations without the emotional intensity that had characterized Dad's birthday dinner. Mom had suggested hosting Sunday brunch at her house, creating a more relaxed environment for the conversations that needed to happen about rebuilding our relationships on foundations of honesty and mutual respect rather than assumptions and misunderstanding. I spent the afternoon driving through Phoenix neighborhoods where I'd grown up, reflecting on the journey from confused college graduate to successful entrepreneur, while processing the emotional significance of finally sharing my achievements with the people who mattered most. The familiar streets looked different somehow, as if the revelation had changed not just family dynamics but my entire relationship with the place that had shaped my ambitions and values. The house where I'd spent my childhood appeared smaller than I remembered, its modest suburban architecture representing the middle-class stability that had provided security while inadvertently creating expectations about conventional success paths. Mom's flower garden was blooming with desert roses and Palo Verde trees, creating splashes of color against the earth-toned landscape that characterized Phoenix's residential area. The neighborhood remained unchanged, but my perspective on my place within its social and economic hierarchy had shifted dramatically. Sunday brunch at my parents' house felt like stepping into an alternate universe where Jessica Martinez was recognized as a successful entrepreneur rather than the family member who hadn't quite figured out her life direction. Mom had prepared an elaborate spread featuring my childhood favorites alongside sophisticated additions that seemed designed to acknowledge my newly revealed status as someone worthy of special effort. Dad's behavior was notably different, engaging me in conversations about business strategy and market analysis with the respect typically reserved for peers rather than children requiring guidance. The transformation in family dynamics was subtle but profound. Instead of the gentle concern and barely concealed disappointment that had characterized previous gatherings, there was genuine curiosity about my work and authentic pride in my achievement. Questions about my business came from intellectual interest rather than worried attempts to understand why I wasn't pursuing more conventional opportunities. The shift felt surreal after years of being treated like the family member who needed help rather than the one capable of providing it. Michael arrived with a stack of business magazines featuring articles about successful female entrepreneurs, clearly having spent considerable time researching the industry context for my accomplishment. His approach was characteristically methodical, treating my revelation like a case study that required comprehensive analysis rather than simple acceptance. Sarah brought homemade scones and asked thoughtful questions about work-life balance and the challenges of building a business while maintaining personal relationships. Ashley's arrival was more emotional, with tears and apologies for the assumptions she'd made about my financial circumstances and life choices. She'd spent the weekend calculating all the times I'd declined to share expenses for family gifts and outings, recognizing that my careful budgeting had been misinterpreted as financial limitation rather than disciplined wealth building. Her guilt was genuine but unnecessary, reflecting the family's collective realization that surface observations had led to completely incorrect conclusions about my circumstances. The conversation over brunch covered territory that had been off-limits for years, including detailed discussions about my business development strategy, the challenges of managing multiple restaurant locations, and the personal sacrifices required to build a successful enterprise. For the first time, family members asked follow-up questions and engaged with the details of my work rather than offering polite acknowledgement, before changing to more relatable topics. Dad's questions revealed his business background and genuine interest in understanding the operational complexities of restaurant management. He wanted to know about supply chain logistics, employee training programs, and the financial metrics I use to evaluate performance across multiple locations. His engagement felt authentic rather than obligatory, suggesting that his pride in my success was based on understanding rather than simply accepting that I'd achieved something impressive. Mom's teacher instincts emerged as she explored the educational aspects of my business journey, asking about the learning curve involved in transitioning from consulting to restaurant ownership and the skills that had transferred between different professional contexts. Her questions helped me articulate the personal growth that had accompanied financial success, recognizing that building Harvest and Table had required developing capabilities I hadn't possessed when starting Desert Analytics. The afternoon extended into evening as conversations deepened beyond business topics to address the emotional dynamics that had shaped our family relationships for the past several years. Uncle Stephen arrived with a formal apology letter and a bottle of expensive wine, clearly having spent considerable time crafting his approach to making amends for his cruel behavior at the birthday dinner. His contrition appeared genuine, though it was obviously motivated by shock at discovering my actual circumstances, rather than recognition that his criticism had been inappropriate regardless of my financial status. "Jessica, I need you to understand that my comments Friday night came from a place of misguided concern rather than malicious intent," Uncle Stephen explained, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone who recognized they were in serious damage control mode. "I genuinely believed I was encouraging you to be more realistic about your career prospects, not realizing that you'd already achieved more success than most people ever dream of." His apology was comprehensive and detailed, covering not just the specific comments that had triggered my revelation, but the pattern of dismissive behavior that had characterized his interactions with me for years. He acknowledged that his assumptions about success and achievement had been narrow and unfair, preventing him from recognizing accomplishments that didn't fit his conventional expectations. The sincerity of his remorse was evident, though I remained cautious about too quickly forgetting the cruelty he'd displayed when he believed I was vulnerable. "I appreciate your apology, Uncle Stephen, and I believe it's sincere," I replied carefully. "But I hope you understand that the real issue wasn't just misjudging my financial circumstances. The problem was feeling entitled to publicly humiliate someone based on assumptions about their life choice. Whether I'm wealthy or struggling, whether I follow traditional paths or create my own, that kind of treatment is never acceptable." The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary, addressing not just Uncle Stephen's behavior but the broader family patterns that had allowed my success to remain invisible while my perceived shortcomings received constant attention. We discussed the unconscious biases that had shaped everyone's expectations about career paths, financial security, and life achievements, recognizing that my unconventional journey had challenged assumptions that needed examination. As evening settled over Phoenix, the family gathering evolved into the kind of authentic connection I'd craved for years.
Conversations became more natural and less charged with emotional intensity, allowing space for genuine curiosity about my future plans and honest discussion about how our relationships could improve going forward. The children played in the backyard while adults processed the revelations that had transformed their understanding of family dynamics and individual achievements. Emma approached me during a lull in conversation, her 8-year-old directness cutting through adult complexities with characteristic clarity. "Aunt Jessica, are you really rich now?" she asked, her question reflecting the child's natural curiosity about what the previous evening's drama actually meant for their relationship. Her innocent inquiry highlighted the gap between adult concerns about family dynamics and children's straightforward interest in understanding their world. "I'm financially successful because I worked very hard to build a business that helps families like ours enjoy special meals together," I explained, choosing words that were honest but age-appropriate. "The most important thing is that I love you and Tyler and Chloe, just the same as always, and nothing about our relationship will change, except that maybe we can do some extra fun things together sometime." Tyler immediately perked up at this possibility, asking whether being a restaurant owner meant I could arrange for unlimited ice cream during family visits. His question prompted laughter from the adults and provided natural transition to lighter topics that allowed everyone to decompress from the emotional intensity of processing major revelations about family relationships and individual achievement. The evening concluded with tentative but genuine plans for regular family dinners at various Harvest and Table locations, creating opportunities for everyone to experience my business success firsthand, while building new traditions based on mutual respect rather than misguided assumption. Mom suggested monthly celebrations where different family members could be honored at the restaurant, ensuring that achievements were recognized and appreciated regardless of whether they followed conventional patterns. 3 weeks later, I hosted the first official family celebration at the newest Harvest and Table location in Tempe, honoring Ashley's completion of her real estate license and her decision to return to full-time work. The gathering felt completely different from previous family events, with genuine pride and support replacing the polite discomfort that had characterized my own professional achievement. Ashley's success was celebrated enthusiastically, but not more enthusiastically than mine had been since the revelation, suggesting that our family was learning to value different types of accomplishments equally. The transformation in family dynamics continued evolving over the following months, with each gathering reinforcing new patterns of communication and respect. Michael began including me in conversations about investment strategies and financial planning, recognizing that my business success provided insights that could benefit his own career development. Ashley regularly sought advice about managing the transition back to full-time work while maintaining family responsibilities, viewing me as a resource rather than someone who couldn't understand the challenges of balancing multiple priorities. Most significantly, my parents' attitude toward my life choices shifted from concerned tolerance to genuine pride and support. Dad began introducing me to his friends as his daughter, who owned a successful restaurant chain, his voice carrying the same pride he'd always shown when discussing Michael's promotions or Ashley's family milestone. Mom started asking for my opinions about community business developments and local economic trends, recognizing that my professional experience provided valuable perspectives on regional growth and development. The ripple effects of the revelation extended beyond immediate family relationships to influence how I approached business decisions and personal boundaries. No longer feeling compelled to hide my success or minimize my achievements, I became more confident about pursuing aggressive expansion strategies and taking calculated risks that could accelerate Harvest and Table's growth trajectory. The psychological freedom that came from authentic family relationships translated into bolder business decisions and clearer personal priorities. 6 months after the birthday dinner revelation, Harvest and Table had expanded to 28 locations across 5 states, with customer satisfaction scores and financial performance exceeding every projection I'd established during the original business plan development. The success was built on the same principles that had guided the transformation of family relationships: authentic communication, mutual respect, and recognition that different approaches to achievement could be equally valid and valuable. The California expansion had proven particularly successful, with Los Angeles and San Diego locations immediately establishing themselves as premier destinations for families seeking high-quality casual dining experience. The farm-to-table concept resonated strongly with health-conscious consumers throughout the region, while the employee-focused culture I'd developed continued attracting talented professionals who elevated service standards across all locations. My personal life had also evolved significantly, partly due to the confidence that came from no longer maintaining exhausting facades about my circumstances and achievement. The energy previously devoted to hiding success could now be invested in building genuine relationships based on honesty rather than careful editing of personal information. Dating became more straightforward when potential partners could understand my actual career rather than the deliberately vague descriptions I'd used to avoid uncomfortable explanations about business ownership. The most unexpected benefit of the revelation was the deepening relationship with my nieces and nephews, who now viewed their aunt as someone with interesting stories about business challenges and entrepreneurial adventures, rather than the family member whose life seemed less exciting than their parents' conventional achievement. Emma had become particularly interested in understanding how restaurants worked, asking detailed questions about everything from menu development to employee training during our regular visit. Tyler's fascination with the business aspects of restaurant ownership had led to educational conversations about profit and loss, customer service, and the importance of treating employees fairly. His 8-year-old perspective on business ethics was refreshing and often insightful, reminding me that success means nothing without integrity and respect for the people who contribute to organizational achievement. Chloe was primarily interested in the food preparation aspects, spending kitchen tours asking chefs about ingredient sources and cooking techniques. The relationship with Uncle Stephen had gradually improved, though it remained more formal and cautious than my connections with other family members. His genuine effort to make amends was evident in his behavior during family gatherings, where he consistently demonstrated respect for my opinions and achievements, while carefully avoiding any comments that could be interpreted as dismissive or condescending. The dramatic reversal in his attitude was both satisfying and somewhat sad, highlighting how much his respect had been contingent on his assumptions about my financial status. A year after the revelation, the family dynamics had stabilized into patterns that felt natural and sustainable rather than artificially corrected through conscious effort. Conversations about business challenges and opportunities had become routine rather than special occasions, while discussions about personal relationships and life choices reflected genuine interest rather than worried intervention. The mutual respect that had been forced through dramatic revelation had evolved into authentic appreciation for different approaches to success and fulfillment. The anniversary of Dad's birthday dinner became an informal family celebration of transformation and growth, marked by gathering at the original Scottsdale Harvest and Table location where everything had changed. The private dining room that had witnessed my revelation was reserved for a meal that honored not just the passage of time but the evolution of relationships built on understanding rather than assumption. Kevin Martinez, now Regional Operations Director, personally ensured perfect service while sharing his own perspective on the dramatic evening that had transformed family dynamic. That night was something I'll never forget, Kevin reflected during a brief conversation while serving our anniversary dinner. The shock on everyone's faces when they realized their assumptions had been completely wrong was incredible to witness. But what impressed me most was how gracefully you handled the revelation, Ms. Anderson. You could have been vindictive or cruel, but instead you used the moment to educate rather than punish. His observation captured something important about the evening that had changed everything. The choice between using dramatic revelations to inflict damage or create opportunities for growth and understanding. The satisfaction of proving Uncle Stephen wrong had been immediate and intense, but the lasting value came from building better relationships based on honesty rather than simply enjoying the moment of vindication. As I looked around the table at family members who now knew and appreciated who I really was rather than who they thought I should become, I felt profound gratitude for the painful confrontation that had forced truth into relationships that had been built on misunderstanding. Uncle Stephen's cruel words had inadvertently provided the catalyst for conversations that needed to happen, revelations that needed to be shared, and transformations that needed to occur. The business empire I'd built in secret was now a source of family pride rather than personal isolation. The success I'd achieved through unconventional paths was celebrated rather than questioned. Most importantly, the relationships that mattered most were finally based on authentic understanding rather than protective deception. The woman who had been dismissed as unsuccessful and directionless was now recognized as the accomplished entrepreneur she had always been, proving that sometimes the most painful moments create the greatest opportunities for positive change. 2 years later, as Harvest and Table celebrated its expansion to 40 locations across 7 states and I prepared to be featured on the cover of Southwest Business Magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year, I reflected on the journey from family disappointment to recognized success. The recognition felt meaningful not because external validation was necessary but because the people who mattered most finally understood and appreciated the path I'd chosen and the achievements I'd earned through dedication, innovation, and perseverance. The birthday dinner that had begun with humiliation and ended with revelation had become the defining moment that transformed not just family relationships but my entire approach to balancing personal authenticity with professional success. Uncle Stephen's demand that I pay for dinner had been granted in the most spectacular way possible, proving that sometimes the most unexpected confrontations lead to the most necessary transformation. The magazine photographer had been circling me for 20 minutes, adjusting lighting and angles while I stood in the flagship Harvest and Table location that had started everything. The irony wasn't lost on me that Southwest Business Magazine had chosen this very restaurant for the cover shoot, celebrating my recognition as Entrepreneur of the Year. The same dining room where Uncle Stephen had demanded I pay for dinner because I supposedly contributed nothing meaningful to our family was now serving as the backdrop for a feature story about building one of the region's most successful restaurant empires. Emma and Tyler had insisted on being present for the photo shoot, their excitement about their aunt appearing on a magazine cover infectious enough to draw smiles from even the most professional photographer. At 10 and 8 years old respectively, they had become my unofficial business consultants, offering opinions about everything from menu design to restaurant decor with the kind of unfiltered honesty that focus groups could never provide. Their presence during this milestone moment felt appropriate, given how much family relationships had improved since that transformative birthday dinner. "Aunt Jessica, are you going to be famous now?" Emma asked during a break between shots, her question reflecting the child's natural curiosity about what magazine recognition actually meant in practical terms. Her innocent inquiry highlighted how much my public profile had changed from the deliberately anonymous business owner who had operated behind shell companies and management firms to avoid family scrutiny. Not famous like movie stars or singers, I explained, appreciating her straightforward interest in understanding my evolving status. But people in the business world will recognize my work and maybe learn from the strategies I use to build Harvest and Table. Sometimes sharing your story helps other people who want to start their own companies. The educational aspect of the recognition felt as meaningful as the personal validation, knowing that my journey might inspire other entrepreneurs facing similar challenges. The photographer resumed shooting, capturing images that would accompany an article detailing my transition from struggling consultant to successful restaurant mogul. The journalist had been particularly interested in my decision to maintain anonymity during the business development phase, viewing it as an unusual strategy that had ultimately contributed to both operational success and personal growth. The story would explore themes of perseverance, strategic thinking, and the courage required to pursue unconventional paths, despite family and social expectations. Dad arrived halfway through the photo shoot, having arranged his schedule to witness this milestone moment in person. His presence felt particularly meaningful given how dramatically our relationship had evolved since discovering my true professional circumstance. The man who had once worried about my lack of conventional career progress now beamed with pride as he watched his daughter being photographed for a major business publication. His transformation from concerned parent to supportive advocate had been one of the most satisfying aspects of the entire revelation process. I still can't quite believe this is real, Dad admitted during a quiet moment while the photographer adjusted equipment. 3 years ago, I was wondering when you'd find a stable job with benefits, and now you're being celebrated as one of the Southwest's most successful young entrepreneurs. The cognitive dissonance is still overwhelming sometimes. His honesty about the adjustment process reflected the family's collective journey toward understanding achievement that didn't follow expected patterns. The photo shoot concluded with group images featuring me alongside key members of the Harvest and Table team, including Kevin Martinez, whose promotion to Chief Operating Officer had been announced the previous month. His leadership had been instrumental in managing the rapid expansion while maintaining the quality standards and company culture that distinguished our restaurants from competitors throughout the region. The collaborative nature of our success deserved recognition, even as my individual story captured media attention. Following the magazine session, I drove to the newest location in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where construction was nearing completion on our 41st restaurant. The expansion into New Mexico had proven particularly challenging due to local sourcing requirements and cultural considerations that needed careful navigation to maintain authenticity while respecting regional traditions. The Southwest's diverse culinary landscape required adaptations that honored local preferences without compromising the farm-to-table principles that defined Harvest and Table's identity. The Santa Fe location represented more than geographical expansion. It symbolized the maturation of a business model that could successfully translate across different markets while maintaining core values and operational excellence. Each new restaurant required months of planning, from site selection and permit acquisition to staff recruitment and community relationship building. The process had become more sophisticated over time, incorporating lessons learned from previous openings while adapting to unique local circumstances. Maria Santos, the general manager I'd hired to oversee the Santa Fe launch, met me at the construction site to review final preparations for the opening scheduled in 6 weeks. Her background included management experience at several high-end restaurants throughout the Southwest, along with deep knowledge of New Mexican culinary traditions and local supplier networks. The hiring process had taken months, but finding the right leader was essential for establishing Harvest and Table's reputation in a new market. The local farmers market vendors are excited about our sourcing partnerships, Maria reported as we toured the nearly completed kitchen facility. Several organic producers have adjusted their planting schedules to accommodate our projected demand for specific vegetables and herbs. The community seems genuinely enthusiastic about having a farm-to-table option that supports regional agriculture. Her updates confirmed that the careful groundwork we'd laid was generating the kind of community support essential for long-term success. The Santa Fe location featured design elements that honored local artistic traditions while maintaining the warm, family-friendly atmosphere that characterized all Harvest and Table restaurants. Native American and Hispanic influences appeared in decorative details, from handcrafted tile work to locally commissioned paintings that celebrated the region's natural beauty and cultural heritage. The balance between consistency and local character had required extensive consultation with community leaders and cultural experts. During the drive back to Phoenix, I reflected on how much had changed since that evening when Uncle Stephen's cruel words had triggered my decision to finally reveal the truth about my business success. The transformation extended far beyond improved family relationships to encompass every aspect of my personal and professional life. The confidence that came from authentic relationships had translated into bolder business decisions, more strategic risk-taking, and clearer long-term vision for Harvest and Table's continued growth. The psychological freedom of no longer maintaining elaborate deceptions about my circumstances had been more liberating than I'd anticipated. Years of carefully editing conversations, deflecting questions about my work and minimizing achievements to avoid family discomfort had created a constant undercurrent of stress that I'd learned to accept as normal. The relief of finally being known and appreciated for who I actually was rather than who others thought I should become had improved every aspect of my daily experience. My romantic life had also benefited significantly from the newfound authenticity. Dating became more straightforward when potential partners could understand my actual career and financial circumstances rather than the deliberately vague descriptions I'd used to avoid complicated explanations about business ownership and wealth accumulation. The energy previously devoted to maintaining protective facades could now be invested in building genuine connections based on honesty and shared interests. 6 months earlier, I'd begun dating Robert Chen, a software architect who appreciated both my business acumen and my commitment to treating employees fairly while building sustainable growth. Our relationship had developed naturally through shared interests in entrepreneurship, travel, and desert hiking without the complications that had characterized previous romantic connections when my true circumstances remained hidden. The possibility of building something lasting with someone who knew and respected my actual life felt refreshing after years of compartmentalized relationships. The family dynamics had stabilized into patterns that felt natural rather than artificially maintained through conscious effort. Sunday dinners rotated between different Harvest and Table locations, creating opportunities for everyone to experience my business success firsthand while building new traditions based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. These gatherings had become highlights of my week, replacing the anxiety-inducing obligations they'd represented when family members consistently questioned my life choices. Michael had become one of my most trusted advisors regarding financial planning and investment strategies, his analytical background providing valuable perspectives on portfolio diversification and risk management. Our sibling relationship had evolved from barely concealed condescension on his part to genuine collaboration and mutual respect. His questions about business operations reflected authentic interest rather than skeptical concern about my unconventional career path. Ashley's return to full-time real estate work had created opportunities for professional collaboration, as Harvest and Table's expansion required expertise in commercial property acquisition and development. Her knowledge of Phoenix area markets had proven invaluable during site selection processes, while my business success had provided her with networking opportunities that accelerated her own career advance. The mutual support between sisters felt organic rather than forced, based on complementary skills rather than obligatory family assistance. The relationship with my parents had deepened beyond simple pride in my achievements to encompass genuine understanding of the challenges and rewards associated with entrepreneurship. Dad's business background allowed him to appreciate the strategic thinking required to build and scale a multi-state restaurant chain, while Mom's educational experience helped her understand the leadership and communication skills necessary for managing large teams across diverse locations. Uncle Stephen's transformation had been the most dramatic,
though it remained somewhat tentative and formal compared to my relationships with other family members. His quarterly dinners at various Harvest and Table locations had become ritualistic demonstrations of respect and contrition, carefully orchestrated events where he could display appropriate appreciation for my success while maintaining the dignified distance that protected both of our egos. The dynamic worked even if it lacked the warmth that characterized my connections with immediate family. The business magazine article was scheduled for publication the following month, coinciding with Harvest and Table's 5th anniversary celebration and the opening of 3 new locations in Colorado. The timing felt symbolic, marking both personal recognition and corporate milestones that represented years of strategic planning and operational excellence. The expansion into Colorado represented entry into our 7th state, with preliminary research suggesting strong market potential for our farm-to-table concept in Denver, Boulder, and Colorado Springs. The anniversary celebration had been planned as a company-wide event, recognizing not just business growth but the employee-focused culture that had made sustainable expansion possible. Every team member from dishwashers to regional managers would be acknowledged for their contributions to creating experiences that consistently exceeded customer expectations, while maintaining the values that distinguished Harvest and Table from corporate restaurant chains focused solely on profit maximization. The evening before the magazine hit newsstands, I hosted a private dinner for family and close friends at the original Scottsdale location, where everything had changed 3 years earlier. The guest list included everyone who had witnessed that transformative birthday celebration, creating opportunities to reflect on the journey from painful confrontation to celebrated success. The same private dining room that had been the stage for my dramatic revelation now served as the setting for a quieter but equally meaningful milestone recognition. Kevin Martinez had arranged for the evening service to be handled personally by staff members who had been with Harvest and Table since before my ownership became public knowledge. Brittany Thompson, now assistant manager and finishing her master's degree in education, supervised the dinner service while sharing her own perspective on the company's evolution and growth. Her success within the organization reflected the development opportunities and career advancement that had become hallmarks of Harvest and Table's employment philosophy. 3 years ago, none of us knew that the quiet woman who occasionally dined alone was actually our owner, Brittany reflected during a brief conversation while serving dessert. But looking back, the clues were there in how you observed everything and asked thoughtful questions about service and operations. You were always evaluating and learning, even when we thought you were just another customer enjoying dinner. Her observation highlighted one of the unexpected benefits of maintaining anonymity during the early years of ownership: the ability to observe genuine customer service and operational efficiency without the artificial politeness that often accompanies known ownership presence. The authentic feedback and unfiltered experiences had provided invaluable insights that shaped strategic decisions and operational improvements throughout the expansion process. As the evening progressed, conversations naturally turned toward future plans and long-term vision for both Harvest and Table and our transformed family relationship.
The children, now comfortable with their aunt's status as a successful business owner, asked detailed questions about expansion strategies and international opportunities. Their interest in understanding business concepts reflected their exposure to entrepreneurial thinking and their growing appreciation for the complexity of building sustainable enterprises. Emma had developed particular interest in the environmental aspects of farm-to-table sourcing, asking sophisticated questions about organic certification, sustainable agriculture, and the carbon footprint associated with food transportation. Her 10-year-old perspective on corporate responsibility was both refreshing and challenging, pushing me to consider environmental implications of business decisions with greater care and specificity. Tyler's fascination with operational logistics had led to educational conversations about supply chain management, inventory control, and the coordination required to maintain consistent quality across multiple locations. His 8-year-old questions often revealed assumptions and inefficiencies that adult perspectives might overlook, providing unexpected insights into process improvements and customer experience enhancements. The anniversary dinner concluded with toasts acknowledging not just business success, but the personal growth and relationship improvements that had emerged from that painful but necessary confrontation 3 years earlier. Uncle Stephen's toast was particularly moving, acknowledging his role in catalyzing the revelation while expressing gratitude for the opportunity to rebuild our relationship on foundations of truth rather than misguided assumptions about success and achievement. Jessica, I need to acknowledge that my cruel words that night inadvertently provided the catalyst for positive changes that benefited everyone at this table. Uncle Stephen said, his voice carrying genuine emotion rather than the formal contrition that had characterized his earlier apologies. Your grace in handling my ignorance and your willingness to educate rather than simply punish created opportunities for growth that I didn't deserve but deeply appreciate. His words captured something important about the transformative power of choosing education over revenge when confronting people whose assumptions and prejudices had caused genuine pain. The satisfaction of proving him wrong had been immediate and intense, but the lasting value came from using the revelation to build better understanding rather than simply enjoying vindication. As I drove home through the desert night, the lights of Phoenix spreading across the valley below, I felt profound gratitude for the painful journey that had led to authentic success and genuine family relationship. The magazine recognition was meaningful, but not as meaningful as being known and appreciated by the people who mattered most. The business empire I'd built was impressive, but not as impressive as the transformation in family dynamics that had emerged from honesty and mutual respect. The woman who had been dismissed as unsuccessful and directionless was now celebrated as an accomplished entrepreneur, but more importantly, she was finally free to be herself without protective deceptions or careful editing of personal truth. The revelation that had begun with Uncle Stephen's cruel demand that I pay for dinner because I contributed nothing meaningful had evolved into recognition that different paths to success deserved equal respect and appreciation. 5 years after that transformative birthday dinner, as I prepared to announce Harvest and Table's expansion into international markets and my engagement to Robert Chen, I reflected on the journey from family disappointment to celebrated success. The recognition felt meaningful not because external validation was necessary, but because the people who mattered most finally understood and appreciated the path I'd chosen and the achievements I'd earned through dedication, innovation, and perseverance. The birthday dinner that had begun with humiliation and ended with revelation had become the defining moment that transformed not just family relationships, but my entire approach to balancing personal authenticity with professional success. Uncle Stephen's demand that I pay for dinner had been granted in the most spectacular way possible, proving that sometimes the most unexpected confrontations lead to the most necessary transformations, and that the most painful moments can create the greatest opportunities for positive change. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.